Welcome to our MapMakersWorld Lifelines, and let me say some short introduction how that happened. It all happened Zoom, and everything happened. Probably everyone reminds the time which we called the COVID-19 time. So since we are all over Germany from the nonprofit organization, we found Zoom, and we thought that's a good idea in this time to connect. And the next step was that we never listened to the people. We always were looking for the great big people on stage, and said, no, wait a minute. There are a lot of wisdom around us and with us. And it turned out that we asked people to share about their life. From India, Germany, wherever. And this adventure we collected and have now, I think, 20 interviews from young people, older people, wise people, every cultural background. And we want to take that on again, because my personal intent is to see more and more the wisdom in other people and not on the gurus and other people, because that reflects to yourself who you are. And I call that the hero of the daily life. And do we see them? And I, as a child, young man, always the stories of Zen monasteries read, where the person who cleans the stairs was most likely the most important person in the monastery. But no one saw that person as a person which was in the moment, in the satori, in that what he was doing. It wasn't about, what a big work he was doing. He did the work he was supposed to do. So anyhow, that's my story behind, and I'm more and more interested in the uniqueness of people. And today I'm very happy to have Jeff online. I don't think that, sorry, Jeff, but that Jeff is someone who asked for the stage to be on. I don't think he's hesitating to go on stage, but this is not his personal attitude. But through the last weeks and months, we have a regular communication, and I felt like that's so important to listen to Jeff. And if I look around, we are all in the age group where we have a lot of experiences, and you might relate to different stories he might share about. And we started already beforehand, before you all came online, to speak about our youth. And I said that I saw some pictures in my childhood or young adult, which are imprinted in myself, which was about the North Ireland conflict. And maybe we start there, if this is fine with you, Jeff, that your childhood actually started in the North Ireland conflict, that you grew up in that kind of atmosphere, which we all have somewhere far away in our mind and pictures. So welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Peter, for welcoming me and inviting me. Yeah, so can you hear me okay? Yeah.
Very good.
Yes, so I grew up in the north in what is pretty much known as in the heart of what is regularly known as the Troubles. And I grew up in an area called Clonard, which is just off the Falls Road, which is basically heart of Republican and Catholic territory. But Clonard was quite famous for a monastery that existed there, a cloistered monastery, which is very unusual, right in the heart of Republican Belfast. And so even as a young child, from probably age of 5 onwards, I would go from the war-torn streets of the city into this monastery with beautiful marble columns, oil paintings in the form of the Stations of the Cross, and a constant wafting of frankincense. So as soon as I passed over that doorway, it was essentially a portal into another dimension, another world. And I spent so much time there as a child inside, reflecting and contemplating, that the clergy actually thought that I was going to be an absolute shoe-in for the priesthood. And but the mother had different plans for me. But I just remember from a very young age this surreal experience of going from basically war-torn streets, burnt out buses, cars, conflict, constant aggression, violence, brutality, into a place of serene peace and calmness. So it really was basically providing me with that sense of two different worlds from the very beginning. And I guess that wasn't strange, because I was born on what is known as, today it's known as Halloween, but in the Celtic world it was known as Samhain. And Samhain is actually a portal between worlds, between this world and the other world, underworld. And at times of at Halloween or at Samhain, we are told that the gates are actually the lowest between the worlds, so that that's when we can actually see people that have crossed over and spirits from the other world, and open up dialogue and communication. So it's no strangeness that I was actually introduced to that concept of differing worlds from a very young age. But as I got older, I experienced a series of traumas, which perhaps maybe in later times my relationship with the mother should probably be explained, so that they fall into place. The first trauma was at the age of 11, and I was in primary school. It was the last field trip of the year, and we went to a working farm in Antrim. And at this time, the farm actually contained an abattoir attached to it. And as a child, I wandered off from the main group during the tour, and I went into this, opened this door, and on the other side of it was one of the most horrendous scenes I've ever seen. It's still etched in my memory, and well, actually burned in my memory. And I witnessed an abattoir, animals being butchered, killed, blood everywhere, total destruction. That was my first trauma as a child. And I remember the shock and the sheer horror of the experience. And I came home and I said to my mother that I was going to become a vegetarian straight away. And she said that you can start cooking your own dinners because you can't survive without meat. So after a few burnt experiences, she relented and started helping me prepare vegetarian meals. But I think the trauma itself was about shock, and it was about coming into consciousness, which is what it was. It was a type of initiation, painful as it was. It was no doubt an initiation of sorts. My second trauma happened about a year later, when I was about 12, perhaps 12 and a half, and I was asleep. And all of a sudden I woke up in the middle of the night with a very, very strong realization and experience of my mother dying, and the painful loss and separation that provides, like a huge heart-wrenching. And I rushed into her bedroom and I shook her awake. And she actually came awake to my surprise, and she wanted to know what was wrong. And I said, I just had a very bad nightmare. But for years afterwards, took me a few years, I looked back at that experience and I realized that it was actually all about the silver cord attaching me to my biological mother was actually being severed in order for me to be able to have an alternative type of relationship. For me, it wasn't until later that I realized that that relationship was eventually going to be with the spiritual mother, with the divine mother. But in order for that to fully happen, I had to lose that physical bond with my biological mother. Painful as it was at the age of 12, I had to go through that sense of tremendous loss. And a year and a half after that, I experienced my third trauma. And these I realize are a series of initiations. And they they didn't slowly bring me into consciousness. They actually brought me into consciousness at full speed. Because by the time I was 14, I would say I was a fully sentient and fully conscious being. And the last trauma was when I was walking home one night from visiting a friend. I was attacked by 3 youths and I was rendered unconscious and basically bleeding to death on the street. When a man with a German Shepherd, believe it or not, protected me and rescued me essentially from the youths. It turned out to be a retired police dog, which I then later gave a present to. But anyway, I was in a coma, semi-coma, for approximately 9 days. And during that time in hospital, I saw at one stage a group of beings standing at the tail end of my bed. They were tall, there was no faces visible, but I could sense that they were androgynous. They were neither male or female. They exhibited both. They were genderless essentially, but they contained both. And all of a sudden they parted and a taller figure came forward, which I just immediately knew was feminine. There was such a strong radiance of love and wisdom from this being that I could actually feel her touch my foot at the bottom of the bed. And she said that his time isn't now and he will come back to us. It was a few years later that I realized that that was actually the mother, and I came to recognize her as Sophia, the goddess of love and wisdom. And it was, again, a few years after that, that I realized that that was my initiation, my third initiation coming into consciousness. But it was also a time of, I realized then that I basically became devoted to the mother after that experience. It was a long time after that that I actually came to know her name. But after that experience of coming out of the hospital, she remained with me for basically, she was always there, but it was at that time that I became conscious of her. And a year after that, I was preparing to leave Belfast because my initiation, I realized even though I disliked a lot of the experiences growing up in the north because it was a very hostile environment, I realized that my soul had actually asked for that incarnation those experiences in order to come into consciousness and to come into wakefulness as swiftly as I did. But my soul also realized that my time had been served and it was time to move on. So at the age of 14, I started writing letters to shipping companies all over the British Isles. And finally, I wrote also to the Royal Navy. That's how desperate I was. But I had an interview with the Royal Navy. But to be clear, I wasn't thinking straight, because I would have become, in a wartime situation, I would have become a conscientious objector anyway. So I would not have ever fought in a war. So finally, I was accepted by a merchant company called P&O, Pacific and Oriental Lines. And they sent me off for an interview to Southampton, which I attended, and I did very well in the interview. And they then sent me off to Sea Training College for about a year, which was in Gravesend in London. And from that, I joined a cruise ship, which was called the Canberra. And the Canberra, the first time that we sailed, actually, I was, before I left the Sea Training College, it was going through a refit in Bremerhaven at the time in northern Germany. And so that was my first experience of actually being really out of the country. And from that, I traveled around the world twice a year, visiting all the major countries of the world. And that was my experience for the next 5 years before I returned home the first year. And then after that, it was every other year that I returned home. But the problems of Belfast seemed to become much smaller as I started experiencing the world. But I think maybe before I continue on with that, of traveling around the world, the importance of expanding one's consciousness, perhaps maybe I should relate the whole invitation, I think, to the feminine was actually born out of this experience of growing up in Catholic Belfast. So a lot of people don't realize is that the Catholics, there was a huge amount of injustice leveled at Catholics in Belfast, and to such a degree that they were referred to as Black Catholics and second-rate citizens. Like, even whenever I was growing up in local papers, people would actually, there would be ads saying RCs need not apply, which is Roman Catholics need not apply. So there was a huge level of separation in the North between Protestant and Catholic. Protestants were obviously superior and more enlightened, and Catholics were almost considered to be savages in a sense. I don't agree with what happened in regards to the conflict and the IRA, but I do believe that something needed to shift in the form of communication and some sort of movement. And unfortunately, that was never ever going to happen. Sadly, innocent lives were taken, but the original idea of that huge injustice, I think, rested very heavily upon me growing up in the very middle of it. And I realized then I could identify with huge injustices around the world, the bigotry, the negativity level against anybody that's other in the world. So it gave me kind of a very strong standpoint to sympathize and to develop empathy towards other people. And from that, it wasn't a big leap forward to make that connection then to the feminine, the injustices that have actually been conducted against the feminine for centuries. And I think it was really, that was the key issue that I was to take away from the North, growing up in the North, through the traumas. That's eventually where I arrived, which is why I became a devotee, basically, of the mother at that point. That's what I really carried away with me from the Northern experience. And from that, it just strengthened.
So, can I ask you a question?
Please.
So, how come that you? How long did you travel with the shipping company?
5.5 years, I traveled around the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and what was then the next step?
Well, the next step after that, well, before I actually sailed at about 13 and a half, before I left Belfast, I cycled down to an artist in Dublin from Belfast. And this artist he was a very famous Celtic artist. And so I'd celebrated his work for years prior to that. So I finally, I wrote to him, then I cycled down to him, but I left him some pieces of my own at 13 and a half. And he then wrote to me afterwards. This was a man called Jim Fitzpatrick, who was famous for his depictions of Irish mythological characters and figures. His images combined the art of Alphonse Maria Mucha, Czech artist, with an Irish stained glass artist called Harry Clark. And he made those images quite famous. But I think he was more famous for a painting called, or picture called, of Che Guevara, rather than his Celtic pieces. But anyway, after I left, he then wrote to me and asked if I was interested in designing some of his pieces and working with him. And of course, this was like, it was a great privilege, because he was almost like a hero figure of mine at that stage, growing up in Belfast. But before I left Belfast, because I was actually practicing the art from about the age of 8 or 9, people wanted me all over West Belfast, wanted me to do murals, Celtic murals. But I refused to do the murals because those murals were there to further divide the community. Protestant and Catholic at that stage, Celtic art was considered Catholic, not Protestant. It was something that Catholic people needed to own and identify, stand behind. And so I refused, because I said that Celtic art was a universal art. It was for everybody, and it was to be celebrated by everybody, and it's for everybody. And so they all thought I was a traitor, and it was a difficult situation, but I refused. And Jim had actually no problem designing pieces. People from prison, IRA prisoners, actually wrote to Jim and celebrated his work, because he was considered a great Celtic hero in a sense. But that was one of the things that I disagreed with Jim about. I wasn't interested in using the art to divide. For me, it wasn't a Catholic art form. It wasn't even an Irish art form. It may have, Celtic art in the Christian period may have come to its height in Ireland, but it wasn't uniquely just an Irish art form. It was much bigger. So anyway, when I was on the ship working, I was constantly making pieces and sending them back to Jim. So he would paint them and then sell them. And so I was doing that. I did that for about 15 years. I worked for Jim while I was working on the ship. So after I left the ship, I moved to the Boyne Valley in the east of Ireland, famous for its mythological or megalithic monuments and mythological areas. But Newgrange particularly, it's famous. So I lived just about a mile from Newgrange, where I started conducting a lot of work, a lot of continued my interest in occult studies, and doing a lot of research into ley lines and lots of other different weird and wonderful things. And it was a very, very powerful place in order to conduct all of that work. And I learned how to divine, and I was divining ley lines all over the Boyne Valley. And so I was continuing to do that type of work. And from that experience, I continued with the art, and I then moved into the west of Ireland about 4 years after that. And I moved into a place on the shores of Loch Mask.
I'm sorry, if you talk about Ireland, do we talk now about the Republic Island, or?
Yes, yeah, no, the Boyne Valley is in the Republic, yes. Sorry.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I actually, once I left the north of Ireland at 14, I never returned to live. That was the last time I lived in the north. I have my parents, my father still lives in the north, so I do visit, but I never returned to live. So yes, I moved in when I came back from the Navy, Merchant Navy, which is a merchant flagship. That's different from the Royal Navy. It's not. I was actually asked if I wanted to, if there was a conflict, if I would man the ship, and I refused. And that particular ship that I worked on was actually taken by Margaret Thatcher during the Falklands crisis with the British Army. But anyway, so yes, I then returned to the Republic of Ireland, which was the first place was the Boyne Valley. Then I moved into a place called Glenbeg in the west of Ireland. And that particular place was very important because it was like the place itself was a very, very powerful place. And I think it was one of those unique places in the world. It's like a portal into another dimension. So it brings energies from very, very deep in the soul to the surface. And depending on what you actually have that needs to be worked through and to be cleansed in the person, that place brought it forth. So there was a lot of negativity in this particular locality, but there was also great capacity for creativity and for growth and expanding one's consciousness. It was a very, very powerful place. And it was while I was living there that I became, it was just a huge period of time where I was very, very creative with all sorts of work, with painting and with writing and with developing lots of different things. That I was given the idea about creating a spiritual foundation dedicated to our mother, to Sophia. And that's what I did. It was around 2000 that I created this foundation. And it was a foundation dedicated to creativity, wisdom, and the spirit.
Okay. Can I?
Yes.
Can I stop you on this point? I would love to talk about the foundation, but since most of us are not very familiar with what art you are actually doing, yes, and what the background is actually from the wood crafting and the painting, and most of us are not very familiar Some of us I know, but not very familiar with the Celtic or Irish mythology. We even not too keen on it in Germany. That might have to do with the Second World War, but this is another story. Um, so can you say a little bit more, or help us, as someone who doesn't know very much besides I can say, oh, it's a beautiful picture.
Yeah, well, I started with the art when I was very young, probably from about the age of 7, but I was writing before that as well, a type of writing which I refer to as soul writing. So for a while I was combining the two, the art and the writing, and then I then concentrated more heavily on the art. But for a long time, I actually wanted to do a different type of painting and a different type of art style, maybe develop a different type of style, because I looked at Celtic art, and for me at that stage it was very simplistic, and I thought maybe I needed to do something more because it just seemed to be very simple. But it wasn't until afterwards that I realized that a lot of people never, they didn't actually see the simplicity of it. They saw a very, very complex art form and a very intricate art form. But I never saw that. I see detail today when I practice it, and I do acknowledge the intricate side of it. But when I'm actually making it, I just see the simplicity of it, and it's mainly because, again, that goes back to another connection with nature, because my fascination with the art, which was essentially developed through one of my lifelines in Belfast that made me survive the experiences that I had, was that I became a cyclist. So from the war-torn city, I would cycle out of that city every single day into the green countryside. I didn't remain. I again, that was another experience of traveling from one world into another world. And from a very young age, I had the second sight, which I lost when I was about 13. At the stage of my last trauma, I actually lost it, and I thought maybe it was to do with the head injury that was inflicted upon me. But I was told later by a spiritual person that it was actually a transition, that the sight went from more of a clairvoyance to a clairsentience, so more on a emphatic level. And before that, it was on a visual level. So when I cycled, I was very close to elemental beings, and I could also see recently departed souls and communicate with them, and even souls that were actually stuck in the physical world. I could also see fairy beings as well, and I was able to communicate with them. And so this brought me closer and closer to nature, and to another aspect of nature that wasn't maybe all that accessible to a lot of people. And when it came to the art was really an extension of that, because Celtic art is essentially, if you look at the symbolism, it's a nature-based art form with the zoomorphic patterns and the knotwork and the spiral patterns. It's all to do with a relationship with nature. That's where the original source inspiration comes from. And so for me, that became very much a very powerful foundation for expression and for sharing my love of nature, but also of the divine feminine. And you might say, well, where's the divine feminine at? Because, well, that's where the mother nature connection comes into place. Mm-hmm. And so for a long time, I was able to, and I still continue to do that, I don't know if you see this piece behind me on the door,
Yes.
but that
Yes.
is a piece of. There's 20 pieces in that series. I'm making them at the moment. That's just a canvas print of a fox elemental. You might not see it that clearly on the door, but that's painting is about 4 feet tall. That's just a canvas copy of it, and that's just showing the elemental connection with animals. And again, I use the feminine beings because I see that as a direct connection with Mother Nature and with the Great Mother. And so,
Thank you, Jeff. Um, I really appreciate that you share with us your privacy. I know it's not something you do on stage, and to allow us to be so close to you, and what moved you, and the process you are going through and went through. I remember that you shared something also, because we both were sharing while we were in the countries. We thought we leave and go in another country. For me, it was America, and I'm still living in Germany for quite a while. So we had on this point a bit of similarity. But you shared or started sharing something about Ireland, and why you think it's so important to see something about Ireland, which which has to do with the feminine energies. And if I can hear a bit more about it, because I think that was so important for me to hear from you.
yeah, no, like yourself, Hans Peter, I tried to leave Ireland along a lot of times. I've moved to New Zealand, I've lived in America, I've been all over Europe. I've tried to leave Ireland on a number of occasions, but every single time the place just brings me back. But I remember this one time in the States, and I was actually living in Ireland at the time, and I was doing an exhibition in the States. And for some reason, I was just somebody asked me a question. Oh, you must miss Ireland, and I just immediately, it was one of those spur of the moment responses. It was like a flash of intuition, and I just responded. I said, "You can't miss anything that you're not parted from." And I realized that you carry the heart, the essence of the country inside. It's like a sovereign connection that you carry. And so Ireland, from the very, very beginning, and even all the way through Irish mythology, was considered to be a feminine country. Even its names have all been taken from Irish goddesses. The name today, which is Eru, or Er, comes from Eru, which was an ancient goddess of the land. And so we have, I think I've always seen Ireland as basically being, because it's always been referred to as the Emerald Heart. If you think about it, emerald is also the stone which is dedicated to the heart. It's the heart chakra. So I've always looked at Ireland as basically being the heart chakra of the world. And for that, it's the feminine essence of the heart chakra. And I believe that that's one of the reasons why we have had such hardship in this country, is because not only because of the fairy tradition, like W.B. Yeats, who was a great poet, Irish poet, he said over 100 years ago that he says that I talk about in Ireland, and he was collecting stories in the west of Ireland, And when he was talking about the fairy tradition and this, that, and the other, he would be saying that it's like I'm talking about an Ireland that died a long time ago, because people weren't really hearing what he was saying. When I talk about the same thing today, people say to me that I'm talking about an Ireland that never existed. And that's just a little over 100 years ago. My feeling is that people have moved away from the feminine in this country, although one of the things that we do have that I believe is a signpost to that devotion is the whole motion behind the Marian cult, which is to do with Our Lady, which is in the Catholic tradition. And you see that all over the Republic, statues of Our Lady at the side of the road. And so there is, you might say to yourself in the Catholic tradition, is it Christ would be the devotion? Christ is the devotion in the Protestant tradition, but in Catholic tradition in the Republic, the devotion is to Our Lady, which is why it's called the Marian cult.
Mm.
And I think that's an extension of the devotion that was given originally to the goddess Bridget, and then by extension, maybe originally to the mother. So I think subconsciously, people are still seeking and questing after the mother, and it's very much in the landscape. You can see that through the different sites, the ancient sites that are here. It's deeply imbued in the landscape, and everything that I do in regards to the writing and to the art is trying to help people reestablish that connection with the mother, and no matter what way that occurs in your life. Because I honestly believe, Hans Peter, that if we can assist, if the mother comes into people's lives, no matter in what capacity, I believe that we would be living in a very different world today.
Mm.
I honestly believe that.
Mm.
But
Well, your call, I believe so too. The call you have expanded to something which you started to share about the foundation. So how come that you take on this new project?
the foundation, when I first started the foundation, it was interesting because it was really at that time, for the first time, like the whole realization behind the foundation came when I finally discovered the mother's name. And it came to me in a series of dreams and visualizations. And she revealed herself, and she said that her name was Sophia. And she said that she was the goddess of love and wisdom. And it was then that I realized that I'd been in devotion to her my whole life. Like she was always there, not even before the series of traumas that I had, but even before that. But I became more and more conscious of her during the traumas, but I never knew her name. It wasn't until around 2000 that I actually finally realized her name. And immediately she was giving me some type of physical connection, substance to her. And I realized then that I needed to put that into some type of physical creation, which is why the foundation was born. And from that, then an extension. But I realized, Hans Peter, that people are going to want to know about Sophia. Who is Sophia? And who is this goddess of love and wisdom? And that's when I realized, so even though the foundation was born, the foundation was kind of more internalized. It wasn't a physical structure as such. It's only today, in the last few years, that I've acquired land in the west of Ireland, and I'm actually building a physical structure in dedication to the mother to inspire pilgrims to come and maybe explore their own unique relationship to the mother and maybe bring that relationship out into the world. to share with others. That's really the ambition behind the foundation and the goal. And so at that stage when I founded it, it was more of an internal thing. So I then embarked upon basically a journey and a quest of discovering who this Sophia being really is. And so I had to go through the different places of through Christianity and through the world religions, and they all had kind of a limited relationship with Sophia and confined, reducing her to certain qualities. And I then came across Sophiology, which was through Russia, particularly the work of Vladimir Solovev and Sergei Bulgakov, two fairly well-known people within Sophiology. But even Sophiology was limiting the being of Sophia. So from all of the learning, I was just strengthening my own unique relationship with Sophia, and the way that I let her speak through me is usually through the art and through my writing. And it's a soul connection, because that's really what I believe one's intuition is, a direct lifeline to the mother. And for me, she inspires me and communicates through me with my creativity, which essentially is a part of me, but it's not my unique gift as such. It's something that I have tapped into. And I believe that everybody's creativity is actually in source, it goes back to the mother.
And you,
And in that sense, Christianity, I think, has somewhat reduced Sophia in the greater world vision of her, in saying that she was a creature, in the sense that she was second born. God actually fashioned her. But in my own intuition and in my own visions, I've actually seen that it's a little bit like Taoism, in the sense that the mother existed before everything else. And inside her, she then gave birth to everything else that existed. So nothing else existed outside the mother before she gave birth to everything. That's including the male and female principles. And from that was the development of a relationship that she had with the divine masculine. And so I think all source goes back to the mother. Everything goes back to the mother.
and behind the foundation in the shell, and the way you are guided to be at the place where now.
Yes.
I mean, you have a real material situation. I mean, the property is not just an acre; it's pretty large, as far as I understood.
Yes, it's 26 acres,
Yeah,
lakeshore property.
yeah,
And
and, and I remember the communication, which at that point uh, I haven't gotten really what it's about, when you shared at the place for Bettina and Georg that you wanted to build a house, but they didn't allow you to build a house. It needed to be somehow much larger and bigger than you were planning it. So it turns out it will be actually a place where people will meet, in a kind of seminar house, and so on and so on. It's still in the process, but I think that is for me, on observing it, or sharing with you, uh, a challenging situation as an spiritual guided man and an artist, to have now a property where, what did you say you plastered last time? So uh, how is it for you to have suddenly, with your partner, pretty large property you're responsible in the moment for, and building it up?
It feels good to actually have a physical property, and but in the sense of, even though we are legally owners of this property, we both see ourselves more as custodians. It's the type of place that we will be building it up in order to be able to pass on to future generations. That's the way that the place will be enacted out. So it's something that I'm excited about, the long-term project, a little bit maybe apprehensive about how some of it's going to unfold, but that's something that will actually happen when the time is right. So at this moment in time, I'm just building the house, which will be at the very center of the foundation. And from that will grow different centers and eventually a large workshop facility where people can actually come and stay and participate in different types of workshops. But it was all, because it's dedicated to Sophia, everything that is actually conducted there will have some type of relationship. But it could be in many, many different diverse ways. It's not just about learning about who Sophia and what Sophia is. It's many, many different ways that she can come into her life and inspire people. Like, for example, with the flower essences, that could be a type of workshop that could be explored, that type of thing. And of course, there's a very strong connection then because of the mother and with Sri Aurobindo. So there'll be a lot of communication and a lot of opportunity for exploring that type of relationship through course material. And so it's basically just going to be a center completely dedicated to exploring the divine feminine, but also of encouraging people to develop and explore and open that internal door to the mother, because once that's opened, she will basically move you to whichever soul place that you're supposed to be in at this moment in time. And all you need to do is just trust and develop that relationship with her. She will do everything else. So with the center, it's very exciting in the sense that it's just at the beginning of physical. So for the first time since I started the foundation, I now actually have a physical foundation.
Mm.
And that is only going to get stronger, and it's only going to get more, it's going to become more enhanced in the future. And of course, the art and the writing, they all feed into that, because I have a small business where I make art prints and things. And so all proceeds of the art goes back into the business or into the property, which basically then helps build projects. And at the moment, it's a bit challenging because I am doing a lot of the work myself and not having a lot of experience in the world of construction. I'm having to learn everything from scratch. So it's taking a little bit longer, but interesting at the same time. And I think my problem was as well, Hans Peter, when I started the house, I looked at the house as just it was a construction project, and it was taking me away from my other work of writing and painting and carving. And I realized it was somebody that reminded me, and they said that your problem is that you need to look at the house also as a creative project, not taking you away necessarily from your creative projects. It is a part of your creative project. And it changed my mind because I was just looking at it as hard labor, and it was hard work, and I wasn't able to see the creativity in it. But I'm beginning to realize that it is a part of the bigger creative project. I just needed to rethink and reprogram my mind.
Mm.
Yes. But
Well, um, maybe some of you have a question or like to say something or say something to Jeff. So we enjoy to ask question and talk with each other, Jeff and myself.
yes,
But we also, I think it's also very nice for Jeff to hear something from you.
yes, if anybody has any questions. Michael, you must have a question.
I don't have a question, Jeff, but last year you published a book. Could you speak a little bit about it, please?
Yeah, let me see. I have one here.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm.
Yeah, that's the first of 5 books that I published last year called The Prophetess, and this is Prophetess Book 1. And anyway, essentially, it's information that came through basically the intuition of a strong connection with the dark goddess of Ireland, which is known as Morrigan. And so it's kind of written very similar to Cahill Cabran's Prophet, in form of question and answers. And so the information in it is very strongly connected to the mother. So any questions that you might have in regards to the world, like for example, on topics like marriage, on religion, it would be coming through the mother's perspective of those. And my job in that was just, it wasn't a channeled piece of work, but it was more, it's soul writing, which means it's very difficult. People often think that soul writing is channeled work. It's similar, but it's a slightly different process. And so the 5 books, essentially, they are going to provide a template for the foundation. That's essentially where they're going to come into that. And so I just completed the first of the 5, and I'm halfway through the second at the moment. The idea is that they take place in an in-between world, but at all significant Irish sites. So the first one is at a place called Uisneach, which is near essentially it's the spiritual center, heart center of Ireland, which is very close to the physical center of Ireland. And so the second one will be taking place at Tara, which is in the east of the country. And so it moves around the country at very significant sites. And it's a large gathering that takes place, but it's not in the physical world, it's in the spiritual world, where the souls of people from all over the world are pulled over into this gathering. And the Morrigan, which is the Irish dark goddess, she's the Irish equivalent to Kali, the Indian goddess. And so she's obviously connected to death and rebirth, but she also has an aspect where she's the goddess of the underworld, but she's also the goddess of heaven as well. So she walks in both worlds, in both realms. So the books themselves will actually operate as a kind of a template, a blueprint for the foundation. I just need to get back to writing.
The first book is it available?
It is, yes, on Amazon, but it's unfortunately at the moment it's in English. Maybe I can talk to Hans Peter at some stage about translating.
Well, then I have to live for a while in Ireland, because it's definitely amazing different culture, even if you're so close in the European area.
Yes.
And this is why I enjoy sharing and talking to you. So it opens the mind, because we Germans, as a cultural circle, have also a closed system, and just we open up that there are different cultures, different understanding, and in a way, a similarity just differently expressed. And I think it's so important to add the best out of all cultures, backgrounds, individual as nation culture, to each other, and not fight it and prove to each other. So
Yes.
I'm very thankful for Michael introducing Jeff to me, because we have a good time, I believe, and I think we will have in the future as well. But it brings us close, that Ireland is so close and still it's so different, and it's adding something to me, at least, which I wasn't aware of. I saw a bit in Scotland, but Ireland has a different vibration.
Mm.
Yeah, and I'm very thankful for you to be, yeah, vulnerable isn't the right word. So the way, Jeff, you are, let's put it that way. And yeah. Betty, you like to say something? Yeah.
Yes. You asked if some of us has a question. I don't have a question, Jeff, because the space you're talking from is so wide, and I'm now in this in this vastness. So if I have a question, if I should formulate a question now, I think I have to get dense, and I don't want it right now.
Mm.
I just want to stay and experience this vastness you opened, because you didn't talk out of your mind. It just came from a totally different Ebene. So I just want to stay there, and I want to thank you that you shared with us, and I'm sure we have another time for questions and sharing.
Thank you, Betty. Actually, it's true what you're saying about the expansiveness, because one of the things that I started doing in regards to the original study, when I started foundation, I was looking at a lot of different traditions that talked about the mother and talked about Sophia. And my problem with coming from a lot of the different traditions, and I was intuitively searching for something. I was on a quest. It was a spiritual quest. And so I was intuitively connecting with all of these different things, but I always felt that there was something missing. And like they were always trying to box and label the mother and confine her. And I just realized, no, it's bigger. It's much, much bigger. Even Sophiology was trying to label and confine the mother. And I realized, no, it's much bigger. Even though I studied a lot of these different traditions, I had to develop a little bit of background. But I also, and you need to learn something before you realize what's missing or what is required to move forward. And so this relationship with the mother, it's a much more expanded, it's a universal concept, and she cannot be boxed. In fact, she refuses to be boxed, and she insists that we free her from a lot of these traditions that we have actually boxed her in. And so it's nice that you're actually able to pick up on the expansiveness, because it isn't a small vision. It's not narrow and it's not controlled. It is one that's just, it's very fluid. And it's it's constantly expanding. But yes, questions at another time. Anyway. So, have you any questions, Hans-Peter?
I would have a lot, but not today.
Yes, I understand.
I'm very clear we will meet in this or that way. We both anyhow. But Maria, I see a hand.
Yes, I'm not presentable, so I stay in my template here. I just thank you, Betty, for finding the words to express what I felt too. It's just so amazing what I picked up from what you were sharing about your journey to come to this place. And what I like most, I had to laugh out loud when you said that about realizing that it did, the building the house didn't take you away, but was another creative project. I like that very much, just to realize that whatever we are doing, it is all part of our journey. And wow, yeah, I love your picture in the back. I was putting it up big to have you on speaker view, and so I could see the picture even better. So the only thing I would appreciate would be maybe either Hans-Peter could do it, or you have some pictures available that you could just show us about the different types of artwork, or how you want to fill the space to make it, well, some things that you shared, but for people to step into that space and to allow themselves to just be, that there doesn't always need to be a program or a schedule. And I think that is something that you're going towards, that it feels like that.
No, you're absolutely right, because it's although there will be eventually workshops and programs available for people to participate in, the actual center is actually going to be open to all pilgrims at any time of the year and any time of any season. And one of the things that I'd like to provide is a large dedicated library, so that people can actually conduct their own studies and research, and actually just be a part of the place and pretty much do their own thing. If they want to go for a walk and to reflect in nature, they can. If they want to come back to do a little bit of writing or a little bit of research in the library, they can. And I'll always be there on site in the background as well, just to offer any help that I can, any assistance that I can. And I will always make my presence and my assistance ability to assist known to people that do arrive, but very quietly, and so that people can. I want to be very careful that I don't want to force people into a relationship with the divine feminine if they're not ready. It's something that has to unfold naturally. And as you say, sometimes it's nice to actually have a space where you're not actually part of a particular workshop or a program. it's just something that is happening unconditionally and it's not being forced upon people. But yes.
Okay.
Hopefully.
Well, maybe Jeff, we could make a little Zoom meeting with some of your artwork and a topic around it.
Yes.
Maybe we chat about it, and if there is interest of some people and even more people, we could have something like that. Okay. Dear people, thank you so much, Jeff, for, oh, Maria again. Hello,
Yeah,
Maria.
sorry, I wanted to do the the rainbows and all that stuff. I was just
Okay.
getting the wrong part.
Okay.
This one I was looking for.
Okay. Okay. So thank you very much, Jeff. I know it was a challenging situation, and I love that you opened your heart and allowed us to join your world and your lifelines, and the honesty, the truthfulness. I really appreciate that, and thank you very much for all of you joining this gathering. And I wish you a most beautiful, blessed, loving day, and be nice to yourself. And see you the next time, wherever and however. And wish you the best today. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, Hans Peter.
Bye-bye, Piers.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Miriam.
Bye-bye, Jeff.
Bye.
Bye-bye, Hans Peter and everybody.